So tonight we're going to start with Isaiah chapter 28. In chapters 28 through chapter 33, it forms almost one continuous prophecy of Judah's relationship with the heathen nations of Egypt and Assyria, along with its own sins and weaknesses. In this section, chapters 28 through 33, there are 6 woes against the drunken rulers of Samaria and Jerusalem, the errors of Judah, and an unnamed destroyer, probably Sennacherib of Assyria. If you turn over to Isaiah chapter 5, I want to read verses 8 through verse 23. And we mentioned that in this section, chapters 28 through 33, there are 6 woes that are mentioned. Notice the woes in this section of Isaiah 5, starting in verse 8. Woe unto them that join house to house, that lay field to field, till there be no place, that they may be placed alone in the midst of the earth. In mine ears, saith the Lord of hosts, of a truth many houses shall be desolate, even great and fair, without inhabitant. Yea, 10 acres of vineyard shall yield 1 bath, and the seed of a homer shall yield an ephah. Woe to them, unto them that rise up early in the morning, that they may follow strong drink, that continue until night, till wine inflame them. And the harp and the viol and the tabret and the pipe and the wine are in their feast. But they regard not the work of the Lord, neither consider the operation of his hands. Therefore my people are gone into captivity, because they have no knowledge, and their honorable men are famished, and their multitude dried up with thirst. Therefore hell hath enlarged herself, and opened her mouth without measure, and their glory and their multitude and their pomp, and he that rejoiceth shall descend into it. And the mean man shall be brought down, and the mighty man shall be humbled, and the eyes of the lofty shall be humbled. But the Lord of hosts shall be exalted in judgment, and God that is holy shall be sanctified in righteousness. Then shall the lambs feed after their manner, and the waste places of the fat ones shall strangers eat. Woe unto them that draw iniquity with cords of vanity, and spin as it were with a cart rope, that say, let him make speed and hasten his work, that we may see it. And let the counsel of the Holy One of Israel draw nigh and come, that we may know it. Woe unto them that call evil good and good evil, that put darkness for light and light for darkness, that put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Woe unto them that are wise in their own eyes and prudent in their own sight. Woe unto them that are mighty to drink wine, and men of strength to mingle strong drink, which justify the wicked for reward, and take away the righteousness of the righteous from him. 6 woes in that section, just as there are 6 woes here in Isaiah chapters 28 through 33. And if you notice, there were 2 of those woes that dealt with the drunkards, people drinking alcohol. You'll see that in this section as well. But now then, verses 1 through 8 of Isaiah 28, I title it Description of the Rulers. And then verse 1, woe to the crown of pride, to the drunkards of Ephraim, whose glorious beauty is a fading flower, which are on the head of the fat valleys of them that are overcome with wine. Notice the wine here and the alcohol, the drunkenness, and the two of them there in Isaiah chapter 5 must have been a big problem in that day. Wouldn't say anything about today, would we? This is a statement of doom for Ephraim. Ephraim represents the northern kingdom. Ephraim was the largest of the tribes of the northern kingdom, and thus it is often used to represent the northern kingdom. It is also called Israel. Israel, before the divided kingdom, dealt with the entirety of the nation. After the divided kingdom, Israel dealt with the northern kingdom, Judah with the southern kingdom. So it's oftentimes referred to as Ephraim, Israel, or Samaria. Samaria being the capital city. So when you come across those terms, think of generally the entirety of the 10 northern tribes. Some, when they look at this, because of the word woe to the crown of pride, think it refers to Samaria in particular. I personally think it refers to or represents all of Israel and not just this capital city of Samaria. They were intoxicated both with pride and drunkenness. Someone read Isaiah chapter 9 and verses 9 and verse 10 for us. Okay. Their pride being destroyed, but still pride. They were drunk with pride or intoxicated with pride. In Amos, the 4th chapter, and in verse 1, he says, "Hear this word, ye kine of Bashan, that are in the mountain of Samaria, which oppress the poor and crush the needy, which say to the masters, bring and let us drink." Kine is cows. Not a very flattering representation of the women of that time, but they oppressed the poor, crushed the needy, and then drink. Turn over a couple of chapters to Amos, the 6th chapter. And in verse 6, that drink wine in bowls and anoint themselves with the chief ointments, but they are not grieved for the affliction of Joseph. So here they drink wine. I guess glasses are not large enough. They have to get bowls in order to fill themselves full with alcohol. And then skip down a few verses to verse 13 of Amos 6. And it says, "Ye which rejoice in a thing of naught, which say, have we not taken to us horns by our own strength?" I must have missed that verse. Okay, I missed, I need to eliminate that verse, but look at the way that Hosea describes them also. And Hosea chapter 4 and in verse 11, where he states, whoredom and wine and new wine take away the heart. He is describing them basically as heavy drinkers, and it takes away their heart. Turn over to Hosea chapter 7 and look at verse 5. In the day of our king, the princes have made him sick with bottles of wine. He stretcheth out his hand with scorners. Again, heavy drinkers. And if you go down to verse 14, again, and they have not cried unto me with their heart. They have howled upon their beds. They assemble themselves for corn and wine, and they rebel against me.
What was that last verse? I'm sorry.
Hosea 7 and verse 14. A continual condemnation of alcohol and how it destroys the moral fiber of people. It did then, it does now. It's no wonder that we are taught to not even take the first drink. That drinking alcohol in any amounts is wrong. Now then, I will clarify one aspect. We're not talking about medical aspect. Paul told Timothy to take a little wine. By the way, anytime you see the word wine, you have to consider, is it talking about grape juice or is it talking about alcohol? Or there are occasions in which it's talking about the juice that's still in the grape. So context determines. But let's just say Paul is telling Timothy, take a little alcoholic wine. For what reason? For your stomach's sake and thine off infirmities. There's medicinal aspects of alcohol that Paul is saying to Timothy, go ahead and drink that. By the way, yes, it is an excellent carrier and will increase the effects of the medicine that you take. And so sometimes it is joined with most of the cough syrups that are seen today have alcohol in them. Yeah, I know. A lot of people did. But 1 Timothy 5, where Paul tells Timothy to drink a little wine for his stomach's sake and his off infirmities, is one of the best arguments that you can ever find to prove that drinking alcohol as a beverage alcohol is sinful. Why? Because Timothy would not touch it, not even medicinally. And he had to be commanded by an apostle of Jesus Christ, go ahead and drink it for medicine's sake, your stomach and your oft infirmities. Because why? He would not touch it. Now, that's the attitude that Timothy had. And that's why Paul had to command him to do it. But I could spend the rest of the time talking about alcohol, but we won't. Obviously, it is used here, the drunkards of Ephraim. Now notice, whose glorious beauty is a fading flower. The fat valleys of them are overcome with wine. The glorious beauty was a fading flower. Why? Because of their alcoholism and because of their wine. It's brought about by their debauchery, their drunkenness. Pulpit commentary has an interesting statement about the magnificent luxury of these people. And I'm not going to read all of the passages that they mention, but it's impressive to see the riches of these people. They write summer and winter houses, distinct each from the other, Amos 3:15. Ivory palaces, 1 Kings 22, verse 39, and Amos 3:15. A wealth of gardens, vineyards, fig orchards, and olive yards, Amos 4 and verse 9. Residencies of hewn stone, Amos 5:11. Feast enlivened with the melody of viols, Amos 5:23. Beds of ivory, Amos 6:4. Wine in bowls, Amos 6:6. Chief ointments, Amos 6:6. Constituted a total of luxurious refinement beyond which few nations had proceeded at the time, and which Isaiah was fain to recognize in a worldly point of view as glorious and beautiful. What, Dale?
So that's like sarcasm.
No, it's not sarcasm at all.
When you call them beautiful, though, that's like being sarcastic, right?
No, it was beautiful.
They're actually beautiful to the eye, in other words.
Yes.
Okay.
From a physical standpoint, they were glorious. It was a beautiful thing. And they had riches beyond what most nations would have. So it's not sarcastic in the least. And he's saying, that's being destroyed. It's fading. Henry?
I always think the description of Solomon's, his temple building,
Mm-hmm.
house, you read the description, all that, all the cedar, nice wood, all that.
Yeah, Solomon had riches beyond imagination. And then when they go to build the temple, his house would have been a magnificent palace. But then when they go to build the temple, everything's overlaid with gold. Some of the richest woods, the best woods available, and then overlay it with gold. That must have been just think of walking into a room and everything in it is gold. That's the way the temple was. Marvelous building. And you can understand then why those people who knew that building, after the 70 years of captivity, they come back and they start building the temple. And you had a part of the people rejoicing and just, this is wonderful, it's great. And then the others group remembered the beauty of the former temple and they were crying because the physical beauty did not come close to the beauty of Solomon's temple. But God said, don't worry about it. It's going to be beautiful because I'm going to inhabit it. That's putting it in my own language.
Saw some of the stuff about all that gold and stuff in Russia with the Tsar's palaces.
Mm-hmm.
But his was all amber. Everything was covered with amber on the roof.
Covered with amber.
And the room was bigger than this hall. That's one room in his house. It was bigger than this whole hall.
Yeah.
What do they do? Boil the amber and pour it, coat it? Is that what they do it? I ain't never heard of that.
I don't know. I don't know how they would do that, but it would have been an amazing beauty. So the terms glorious beauty and fat valleys are describing actually the beauty of Samaria. Barnes Notes makes this comment about Samaria itself. that the city was built on a pleasant and fertile hill and surrounded with rich valley, with a circle of hills beyond, and the beauty of the hill on which the city was built suggested the idea of a wreath or chaplet of flowers or a crown. He goes on to say, its situation is extremely beautiful and strong by nature, more so, I think, than Jerusalem. It stands on a fine, large, insulated hill, compassed all around by a broad, deep valley. The valley is surrounded by 4 hills, one on each side, which are cultivated in terraces to the top, sown with grain and planted with a vine and olive trees, as is also the valley. The hill of Samaria likewise raises its in terraces to a height equal to any of the adjoining mountains. So he describes a beautiful city. Henry?
I was just thinking about the Samaritans that found Christ.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't associate with Samaritans because of their intermarrying situation.
Right.
That's what I think what it was.
Mm-hmm.
What, is it just the whole southern kingdom? Just Samaria or what? There was all about
At the time of Christ, okay, what had happened during the time of the captivity, the northern kingdom going into captivity in 722 BC. There's a return, but after some of the Jews returned, there was the intermarrying of people with the nations. They come back, and you basically have the Samaritans coming as a result of that. Because of that relationship or that intermarrying, you find that the Jews did not associate with them. Think of, you've probably seen older movies in which you have someone who's half Indian and half white, and called half-breeds. Derogatory term, and the Indians didn't want them, the white people didn't want them, they were ostracized by everyone. Well, that's kind of the ostracism that you saw with the Samaritans, because the Jews did not want anything to do with them. And if you read the book of Nehemiah, you'll see a lot of that. Tobiah, Sanballat, Geshem, those individuals were Samaritans, and they said, we're with you, we're kin with you, let us help build the tabernacle. And they were told no. And thus they started a continual troubling of Israel in the building of the temple, because they hated the Jews as a result of their ostracism. So, but that's a lot of the book of Nehemiah. But here are this beautiful areas of fading flower. The figure or the language of the city is taken out from the standpoint of it's representative of the nation itself, and the nation is going to be destroyed. Thus a fading flower, or it's overcome. So verse 2 then, we have that, behold, the Lord hath a mighty and strong one, which as a tempest of hail and destroying storm, as a flood of mighty waters overflowing, shall cast down to the earth with a hand. This word, behold, it is a word which means pay close attention. Here's something that is important. Now, the Lord hath a mighty and strong one. The word Lord here is the Hebrew term Adonai, means master or ruler. And he's saying, here is the ruler who is preparing a nation that is strong. And a tempest or a destroying storm is going to come like a mighty tidal wave that the Lord is going to cast down to the earth. I think it's interesting. You have this mighty, strong nation that one who is stronger than they are is preparing to use them to destroy Samaria. Okay, Dale.
Isaiah 10:5, O Assyria, the God of anger, and staff in their hand is among the nations. And it goes on through verse 7.
Okay, they were God's instrument to punish Israel. But I think the interesting part to me is that he uses that term, a ruler, that God is the ruler of this one who is a mighty and strong nation. And they're going to come like a tidal wave coming and destroying Samaria. But God's the one who's the ruler. He's in control. He's using them to carry out his purposes. Homer Haley stated that the picture is one of savage destruction controlled only by the hand of God. And that teaches us a great lesson that God is the one who is always in control. Doesn't matter what's taking place, God is the one who is in control. Book of Daniel deals with that to a great extent, especially in relationship to kings and nations. That he raises up kings, he destroys kings as he wills. Well, now then, God is raising up Assyria to destroy the Samaritans, or Samaria, and the northern kingdom. And they were a powerful, strong nation. Tiglath-Pileser III carried away northern Israel into captivity in 734 to 733 BC. 9 years later, Shalmaneser V began a siege against Samaria, which fell to his successor, Sargon II, in 721 BC. So he died during that time, and Sargon, his son, became the king, and he's the one who finished the destruction. The Assyrians were well known for their violence. During battle, their barbarianism included things such as skinning people alive, cutting off hands, feet, noses, ears, pulling out their eyes, pulling out tongues, and they would make heaps of human heads that were decapitated in battle. They were a vicious people. And God is saying, that's who I'm raising up to punish this glorious beauty, fat valleys, your luxury, your pride, your drunkenness, your debauchery has brought about this type of a destruction.
And shows how furious God was with the needy and the poor
Well, yes, God's patience had come to an end. God is patient. He's long-suffering. As Peter writes in 2 Peter 3 and verse 9, he does not wish any to perish, but that all should come to repentance. He sent them prophet after prophet. They continued to rebel, and of the 19 kings of the northern kingdom, how many of them were described by God as being good? Correct. That's not 9, that's none. 0. Zilch. Not a one of them were described by God as being good. They were all evil. And thus, his patience had run out, and now then, he's going to destroy them. Henry? Our nation needs to take heed. I can remember, a couple of years ago when I was growing up, and we had preachers at that time saying, how many righteous is God sparing the United States for? Our nation has become far worse since those times. From a moral standpoint, the debauchery that is seen, the wickedness that is, it just abounds in our nation. And really, to a great extent, the world over. You would be hard-pressed to find a nation today that is a moral nation as a whole. There might be some, but the majority are not. And you wonder how many righteous is God sparing the nation for? We know the sermon that I preached Sunday on few. You look at specifically Sodom and Gomorrah. If the lower estimates of 500,000 people in Sodom is true, and then you add Gomorrah and the cities of the plain, how many people? Don't really know. And God would have spared it for 10 righteous souls. That's not very many among that many people. And if God would have spared those cities for 10 righteous souls, how many is he sparing the United States for? How many people? How many righteous ones? And I dare say that in a lot of places and with a lot of groups of people, the description of God of the people of Noah's day, that the imagination of their heart is only evil continually, would be a good description of a lot of people in our society today. And let me go a couple of steps farther. So many of them do not want your acceptance. They don't want us simply to accept them. They want us to go beyond simply acceptance to giving our stamp of approval of it. That's the and even just that acceptance is wrong. We cannot accept evil. But what we're saying is that's not enough for these people. Even though a lot of religious groups have compromised and allowed the evil, they then want to make them advocate the evil, and a lot of them do so. Verse 3, then the crown of pride, the drunkards of Ephraim shall be trodden underfoot. Samaria, or Ephraim, with its pride and drunkenness, would be trampled down by the power of God, as he used the Assyrian army to destroy them. God sometimes did things directly, but many times he used an instrument to accomplish his purpose. In using an instrument, God is still doing it. Carl, have you ever used a chainsaw to cut down a tree? You have? The chainsaw did it, you didn't do it, right? The chainsaw acted all on its own, right? Yeah. No, it's a simple illustration. Carl used the chainsaw to cut down the tree. The tree was cut down by the chainsaw, but Carl's the one who did it. God used the Assyrian army to destroy Samaria. The Assyrian army did it, but God did it. God used them. He was their instrument. Let me add, today, God works on the heart of man. He does so by the Word of God. He doesn't do it by a still small voice. He doesn't do it directly, but he uses an instrument, which is the Word of God. Now then, does God work on the hearts of man? Yes. He uses something, an instrument, which is the Bible, in order to accomplish changing man's heart. But here, crown of pride, well, going to be trodden underfoot. Homer Haley mentions the ruins of the once proud city and nation have continued to be trampled underfoot through the ensuing centuries. The northern kingdom of Israel, as a kingdom, they never were restored. Certain people within those tribes, they returned under Nebuchadnezzar and not Nebuchadnezzar. And now I've got his name in my mind and I can't even think. Cyrus's decree that allowed them to return under Zerubbabel. There it is. Under Zerubbabel, then others. But those were individuals and groups within those tribes. As a nation itself, the northern kingdom was never restored. And where is it today? Well, it's still gone. Next week, if we don't have another hard drive crash, we'll start with verse 4, Lord willing.